I came home on Christmas Eve, as snow was gently falling and the warm yellow lights on the porch flickered like a scene from some holiday movie. Only difference was, I no longer felt like I belonged in that movie. The old wooden door creaked as I pushed it open, and warmth from the fireplace spilled out, mixed with the scent of cinnamon and gingerbread cookies my mom always baked during the holidays. But it was all just a facade. I knew that the moment my eyes landed on the photo hanging on the wall. It was right above the fireplace. Mahogany frame, glossy print, carefully placed like a prized keepsake. And in it was my family, the three of them. My mom in her favorite ivory knit sweater, standing close beside my dad with his polite smile, and in the middle, my younger brother, Ryan, pulling a goofy face like he always did. I stared at the picture for a few seconds, the chill cutting through my coat. Because I wasn't in it, not hidden, not standing behind someone, I simply wasn't there. There was no sloppiness in this photo. It wasn't a quick snapshot or a badly cropped frame. It was a deliberately taken and edited picture, printed large and displayed proudly in the most important room of the house. A conscious decision. As if I had never existed. As if I were an unwanted memory they deleted with a single click. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat, then stepped into the living room like nothing had happened. My mom called out from the kitchen, her voice gentle, like everything was perfectly normal. "Catherine, you're here. I'm making that chicken stew you love." Her tone didn't waver. Not a single question about my flight, not a word about the weather or the months I'd been away. No explanation for what I'd just seen, for being erased from the shared memory of this family. I hung my coat on the hook, brushed the snow from my boots, and told myself I was imagining things, that maybe it was just a temporary photo. But my mind wasn't that easy to fool. Ryan was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, nodding slightly in my direction. "You're here. Thought you weren't coming." I gave a half smile and sat across from him. "Yeah, I used to think that too." On the table were neatly wrapped presents, handwritten tags, shiny ribbons, each with a name. Dad's, Mom's, Ryan's, but not mine. I glanced at the tree, decorated as carefully as every year, except the handmade ornaments I'd crafted as a kid were gone. The glass baubles with names etched on them, the glittery wreaths I'd glued together, all vanished, as if I'd never left a mark. Mom stepped out with her apron dusted in flour, her face glowing. "Dinner's almost ready. Is everyone hungry?" I looked at her, trying to read any hint of guilt in her eyes. But there was none. She was still smiling, still gentle, as if there was nothing worth mentioning. "Mom," I started, but then stopped. I had planned to ask about the photo, but suddenly I felt foolish. I already knew the answer. A forced chuckle. A "don't be so sensitive." An excuse like, "no one meant anything by it." And I didn't have the strength to hear that anymore. My dad came down the stairs, holding a glass of wine, his voice even. "Catherine, you look good. What have you been up to?" Not "how are you?" Not "I missed you." Just a casual question, like he was chatting with a neighbor. "Thanks, I've been managing," I replied, then walked into the kitchen, where heat from the oven filled the room. The food smelled amazing, everything perfectly prepared, only I no longer had an appetite. It didn't feel like home anymore. Dinner played out like a performance. Everyone stayed in character. Mom asked Ryan about his internship at the ad agency. Dad talked about his upcoming golf tournament, and me, I just sat there, an unwilling audience. No one asked about my new job. No one asked why I moved cities. No one cared if I was still with my ex. Every word at the table felt like a tiny needle, subtle, but enough to remind me I was just a stranger here for the occasion. When Ryan opened his gift from our parents, an expensive smartwatch, I tried not to react. As for me, at the end of the meal, I received a pair of wool socks and a card that read, "Merry Christmas to my strong daughter." I smiled faintly, not because I was happy, but because I had stopped expecting. After dinner, Mom told me I'd be sleeping in the guest room. Not my old room, the one with photo-covered walls and daisy print sheets I adored. That room was now storage, replaced by a foreign bed and a flickering nightlight. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wrapped in my scarf. Then I pulled from my coat pocket a thick cream envelope, the recipient's name printed in delicate handwriting. I'd prepared it weeks ago, unsure when to hand it over. The moment I saw the photo above the fireplace, all hesitation disappeared. I didn't need to raise my voice, didn't need an explanation. I just needed the truth to be where it belonged. That night, I lay there listening to the wind howling through the window and the soft footsteps of someone heading to the kitchen for water. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about all the years I had waited for a real hug, for a sincere question, for a simple recognition. But even now, all I have is an empty space in the family photo and an envelope holding something they can't deny one more time. On Christmas morning, I woke to the smell of waffles and the sound of music playing from the small speaker in the kitchen. Let It Snow played softly through the closed door, mixed with Mom's laughter and the scraping of chairs on the wooden floor. I lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, then reached for the envelope still tucked in the pocket of my coat, hanging at the head of the bed. The paper was still smooth under my fingers, as intact as the resolve I had felt the night before. When I stepped into the kitchen, everything was in place like a photo shoot ready for a magazine. The table was covered with a red and white checkered cloth, candles were lit, and a tray of cinnamon rolls sat in the center like an essential showpiece. Mom was plating scrambled eggs, her hair in a neat bun, lips painted coral. She looked so cheerful, like nothing strange had happened the night before. "Good morning, sweetheart. Hope you slept well," Mom said without turning around. "The living room was a bit cold," I replied, then poured myself a cup of coffee. Dad was already at the table, focused on his phone, and only nodded as I pulled out a chair. Ryan was talking about his new job in Austin, where he'd just been hired as an interior designer for a restaurant chain. My brother had the tone of someone used to being listened to, steady voice, well-timed pauses, confident eyes. "And I'll be flying to Tokyo in February. They're opening a new branch, and they want me to help with the Zen-inspired LED lighting concept." "That's amazing," Mom said, eyes lighting up. "I always knew you had a creative touch. Remember when you repainted the bathroom at 13? No one in the family has dared change that wall color since." Everyone laughed. I smiled along, but it felt like I was smiling in someone else's photo. Forced. Out of place. "Catherine, are you planning to switch jobs?" my dad asked, eyes still on his screen. "I already did, back in September. I'm working as an operations manager for a logistics firm in Denver." "Oh, right, Denver." No one followed up. No comments, no congratulations, no compliments, not a single glance in my direction. Just a silence that quickly got filled by Ryan continuing his story about a showroom design project in Manhattan. When the gifts were brought out, I stayed seated, knowing exactly how things would unfold, just like every other year. Ryan opened Mom's present first. Inside was a Tag Heuer watch with a brown leather strap and a blue dial, clearly a collector's edition. "Oh wow, Mom, Dad, this is the limited edition." Mom clasped her hands together, eyes sparkling like she'd just performed magic. "We knew you loved that model since last year, so your dad ordered it back in June." My dad smiled and patted Ryan's shoulder like he'd just closed a big deal. As for me, I got a mug, white with black letters. "Special daughter, who else could it be?" I turned the mug in my hands, my finger running over the words like brushing against an old joke. Mom said, lightly, "I thought it was cute. It made me think of you right away." I smiled, but all I felt inside was emptiness. I used to try to understand them, told myself maybe they just didn't know how to show affection. But the older I got, the more I realized it wasn't that they didn't know how, they just didn't want to give it to me. I remembered when I was 17. I got invited to a summer internship program at a research institute in New Jersey. I was so excited to tell my parents, thinking they'd be proud. But Mom just asked, "Can you wait until next year? Your brother needs me to take him to weekend art classes." So I didn't go. A year later, Ryan got an art scholarship to UCLA, and the whole family threw a big outdoor party. Applause, lights, a three-tier cake. When I got my acceptance letter from the state business school, I got a quick hug from Dad, and a reminder. Make sure you save your money. I used to think I was stronger than Ryan. I got by on part-time jobs, from working at supermarket counters to handing out flyers at fairs. Once, I couldn't afford a textbook, so I hand-wrote all the lecture notes on loose paper and took photos of the library copy with my old phone. I never blamed anyone for it. I just wished someone had asked, "Do you need help?" When I got sick in my final year of college, had a high fever for 3 days, barely strong enough to get medicine, I called Mom. She answered, said she was at Ryan's art exhibit, and asked if I could wait until the weekend. I hung up and for the first time felt both empty and oddly free inside. That's when I began learning to live without them. Without encouragement, without gifts, without recognition. But knowing is one thing. Living with it is another. Watching Ryan beam over his new watch, I wasn't angry at him. I just saw more clearly where I stood. Always on the edge, just enough not to be forgotten entirely, but never enough to be fully kept. Breakfast ended with laughter. I washed my mug, placed it upside down on the drying rack, then quietly grabbed my coat from the living room. The envelope was still in the pocket. I planned to hold on to it until noon, after all the gifts had been opened, after everyone finished playing their roles. But something in me had shifted. The photo above the fireplace, the expensive watch, the mug with its loaded message, it all piled up, pushing me toward a limit I had touched too many times before. I pulled out the envelope and placed it on the table next to a bowl of untouched strawberries. No one noticed. I sat back, waiting for the moment when everything would change. Not because I caused a scene, but because for the first time I was making them face the truth. I'll never forget that day. A crisp September morning, slightly chilly, when I stopped by the Fremont County Administrative Office, just to request a copy of my residency certificate for a new job application. It was a simple, routine errand, nothing special. But I never expected that one document would open a door that had been locked tight for nearly a decade. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and reading glasses on a chain, looked at her screen, then tilted her head and asked me, "You're Catherine Moore, born July 18, 1992, correct?" I nodded. "So, you're still listed as the property owner at 2185 Brookfield Street." I froze. "Sorry, what?" "2185 Brookfield, the triplex near Creekside Park," she said in a steady tone like she was reading off a daily list. "That property's been under your name since 2016, transferred from Mr. Edward Moore. Edward Moore was my grandfather. He passed away 8 years ago." I thanked her and left the counter feeling like someone had just spoken to me in a foreign language. I didn't own a house. I had never been notified of any inheritance. No one had ever mentioned my grandfather leaving anything to me. For the entire week after, I lived like a ghost. I went to work, smiled, laughed as usual. But at night, I started digging. Searching public records, emailing the property archive office, and hiring a lawyer to help comb through any legal documents tied to Edward Moore. And layer by layer, the truth came out. My grandfather had left behind a legal, notarized will, clear and binding, in which he wrote, "I leave full ownership of the property at 2185 Brookfield Street to my granddaughter, Catherine Moore. No conditions. No intermediaries." But I had never seen that will. Because right after he passed, my father, Robert Moore, handled all the paperwork for the family. He told me my grandfather left a small amount of cash for funeral expenses and a few keepsakes he wanted us to hold on to. I never questioned it. It wasn't until I reviewed the tax records that I realized my parents' names kept appearing in income reports from renting out the 3 units in that house. They had been quietly collecting rent, renovating, even raising prices for 7 years, operating as property managers without any legal right. Meanwhile, I The sole legal heir had been completely shut out. I remember sitting for hours in front of my computer, hands trembling as I read each detail. While I was borrowing money to pay for dorm fees, eating cold sandwiches to save for the next semester, my parents were using property in my name to fund Ryan's private university tuition, throw outdoor birthday parties, and take spring vacations to Florida. Once the initial shock wore off, I felt strangely calm. No more sudden anger like all the times I'd been overlooked before. Just a cold, steady clarity. I knew what I needed to do. I hired a lawyer to prepare a full set of documents. Certified copies of the will, evidence from property records, bank statements, and letters from the rental office. A nearly 1-inch thick file, neatly sealed in a cream envelope stamped with a red legal seal. I'd kept it in my coat pocket since early December, carrying it around like it was the only thing holding me together through these artificial family dinners. I wasn't planning to explode. I didn't need a dramatic confrontation in the living room. I just wanted them to know that I knew. That this time, I wasn't the compliant daughter, waiting patiently for an explanation that would never come. I remembered the last time I mentioned Grandpa. It was on my 25th birthday, when I quietly brought cake to his grave and sat there for hours, telling him about my job and how I'd moved to Portland. When I told Mom about it, she just nodded and said Ryan was also thinking about moving there because the street art scene in Portland really suits his energy. Not a single word about the fact that I'd been living there for 2 years. Funny thing is, I'd forgotten about that house too. Grandpa used to say he'd renovate it after retirement, turn it into a place where lonely seniors could rent at a fair price. I thought he had sold it long ago. I never asked again, because I wasn't used to expecting anything from this family. Now I understand. Some things you don't need to ask for, because they were yours all along. On Christmas night, I placed the envelope on the dining table, amid torn wrapping paper and half-finished wine glasses. No one noticed. No one asked. They were too busy chatting, tossing hollow praise at Ryan and his plans to open his own gallery. I sat there silently, my hand resting on the rim of that special daughter mug. And this time, I truly believed the words. I was special because I was the only one in that room who carried the truth. And I was about to make them taste it. Every line, every word, no accusations, no tears, just black and white facts and a Christmas smile. I was ready. I sat quietly at the corner of the table, sipping lukewarm coffee from the mug that read, "Special Daughter." Around me, Christmas carried on exactly as scripted. Mom added more cookies to a plate, Dad played soft classical music from the Bluetooth speaker, and Ryan laughed loudly as he unwrapped another present. A pair of next-gen noise-canceling headphones, the same model he'd mentioned during an interview. The cream-colored envelope still lay untouched on the table, surrounded by wrapping paper, red ribbons, and crumbs. No one noticed it, at least not until my mom picked it up with a curious look. "What's this?" she asked, her voice still light, as if she were asking about dessert. I looked up, completely unfazed. "From me." My dad raised an eyebrow, pausing mid-tie on the last bow of Ryan's gift. "You didn't have to get us anything. Just having you here is enough." I set my mug down and said evenly, "I know, but this time, I wanted to." The air paused for just a beat, just enough for me to feel that everything was about to shift. My mom sat down, turned the envelope over in her hands, and looked to my dad as if waiting for a signal. He gave a small nod, and she began to open it. The rustling paper echoed in a room that was already too quiet. My dad leaned over her shoulder to read along. Ryan was still organizing wrapping paper, but I knew his eyes were about to shift. About 20 seconds passed. I hadn't taken my eyes off my parents. My mom's face began to lose color gradually, and my dad furrowed his brow, sweat beginning to form at the tip of his nose. "What is this?" my mom asked, her voice lower now. The lightness was gone. I answered slowly and clearly, like reading a line from a contract. That's A copy of Grandpa's will. It states clearly that he left the house on Brookfield Street to me, directly, without conditions or intermediaries. My mom blinked rapidly and my dad placed the papers down as if they'd burned his hands. Ryan looked up, confused. Wait, what house? I turned to Ryan, calm as ever. The house you used for your creative lifestyle photo shoot in last fall's campaign? Ryan's face hardened. You mean? Yes, I cut in. That house was a gift from Grandpa to me, but for the past 7 years, Mom and Dad have been secretly renting it out, collecting money and treating it like their own. My dad shot up from his chair, the legs screeching against the floor. Catherine, it's not what you think. I did? I didn't respond. I simply pulled out a confirmation letter from the property registry and a letter from the attorney, placing them on the table. It's all here. Title transfer records, rental income statements, bank records, everything's clear. I didn't come here to argue, I came to inform. My mom stayed seated, her mouth slightly open as if searching for words, but finally all that came out was a sigh. We didn't mean to, Catherine. Things were complicated back then. You were in school. You couldn't manage a property. Your father just wanted to keep things steady. I leaned forward slightly for the first time. No one asked me, no one told me, no one let me decide what to do with my own inheritance. And all that time, I was borrowing money, eating instant noodles, juggling 3 jobs just to stay afloat, while you used my money to vacation in Palm Springs. My dad raised a hand, trying to calm things down. You were always strong. You didn't need... It's that kind of thinking that left me behind, I said, my voice low. Being strong doesn't mean being used. Not needing help doesn't mean I deserved to be forgotten. Ryan stood up, hands on his hips. Oh, I didn't know anything about this. You didn't need to. You just got to enjoy it. Silence flooded the room like a thick wave. My mom looked up, eyes glassy but dry. So what are you going to do? I already did. The house is officially back under my name. All lease agreements have been updated. Starting next month, rent will be deposited directly into my account. You no longer have access... My dad frowned. By doing this, you're destroying everything we built. I laughed, softly but clearly. No, Dad, I'm just taking back what's mine. My mom reached out, her voice hurried. But you can't do this to your family. I looked her straight in the eye. Family? You haven't been mine for a long time. I stood up, put on my coat, while the background Christmas music kept playing awkwardly behind me. Ryan called out, You think you're better than us now? I turned back, gave a faint smile. No, Ryan, I just know I'm not beneath you anymore. I walked out of that house without looking back, without needing to say anything else. The snow was falling light as mist, not heavy, not denying. I took a deep breath of the freezing air. Clean, sharp, real. I knew, from that moment on, I was no longer hidden. No longer the faded figure in old photographs. No longer the one living on the edge of family memory. I was the one standing in the center of my own story, in the center of the house that bears my name, in the center of the truth. And this time, I wasn't running from it. 2 weeks after Christmas, I got the first message. It came at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, just as I was making coffee in the small kitchen of my apartment in Denver. My phone lit up. From Mom. Sweetheart, your father and I just got a notice from the bank. We need to talk, urgently. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I'd learned to listen to silence more than any explanation. 7 years of silence from them couldn't be undone by 3 broken lines in a text message. The second message came that afternoon, from a number I hadn't saved but still recognized by the way it was written. I know you're angry. But can we sit down and talk like adults? You don't want this to tear the whole family apart. This time, I chuckled. Like adults? Adults don't alter wills behind their daughter's back. Adults don't use their daughter's property to fund vacations for the chosen child. I turned off notifications. By the end of January, I heard from an old friend who lived near the condo where my parents had been staying. She sent me a photo. The unit they once lived in had a handwritten, "For sale by owner" sign taped to a piece of white cardboard. A week later, I saw the listing pop up on a local classified site. The description read, "No agent, must sell quickly due to personal financial matters." That condo had once been what my mom called our second nest, where she hung her favorite landscape paintings and told Ryan, "Someday you can use this as your creative office." Now, they were being forced to sell it. I didn't feel triumphant, but I didn't feel guilty either. I knew without the rental income from the Brookfield house, they couldn't keep both places going. I also knew that during all those years, they had no stable income. My dad had retired from engineering 3 years ago, and Mom only worked a few part-time shifts at a nearby flower shop. They'd been living entirely off rent money, from property they kept hidden from me. And Ryan? One evening in mid-February, while I was reading, my phone lit up again. From Ryan. I got kicked out of the studio. They said I'd been late on rent. "Mom says you won't help. Are you seriously going to ignore this?" I lock the screen. Ryan had once bragged about that studio at a year-end party in Los Angeles, said it was an open space for creative freedom, untouched by finances or responsibility. Maybe now he finally understood that even freedom needs to be sustained by truth and integrity. About a week later, I heard through friends that Ryan had moved back in with our parents. They were now all sharing the old house in the suburbs of Fremont. The same one my mom once called, "too small for big dreams." That house had once been where I slept on the sofa during holiday visits. Now they had no other choice. I still lived my own life. Waking up early, working at the logistics company, coming home in the evenings to read, sometimes watering my plants or walking the dog I recently adopted around the park. I no longer had to prove my worth. No longer needed to build a story to make someone proud. I just lived, peacefully. In the house on Brookfield, I officially took over ownership and re-signed the lease agreements for the 3 families living there. When I announced a 10% rent reduction below market rate, one of the tenants burst into tears. The woman on the ground floor hugged me tightly and whispered that I was the first landlord who made them feel seen as a human being. That moment was worth more than any gift I had ever waited for from my parents. The final message came one afternoon in March, accompanied by a long email. This time, it was from my mother. "Catherine, I know you're angry, but you can't let this one thing ruin everything. We're family. Ryan is really struggling. Your father hasn't slept in a month. I know I was wrong, but please, think it over. Families shouldn't fall apart over one house." I read that line and stopped. One house? I remembered all the nights I slept in that damp, drafty dorm room, too broke to buy a new blanket. All the times I had to choose between buying a textbook or filling my gas tank. All the months I forced myself to reject phone calls because I knew they couldn't, or rather wouldn't, help. And now, when I'm no longer a resource they can quietly drain, they call it one little thing, just a house. I closed the email. I didn't respond. I didn't need to scream. Didn't need to defend or argue. My silence was the clearest answer I could give. I had started learning how to enjoy silence, not the silence of being forgotten, but the quiet of someone finally living in alignment with their own worth. I didn't hope they would understand. I only hoped they would stop. And if they couldn't, I wasn't there to listen anymore. One Sunday afternoon, sitting in the backyard of the Brookfield house, I watched sunlight filtering through the leaves and thought, maybe this is what I really inherited from my grandfather. Not a house, but the right to choose my own life. That spring arrived earlier than usual. The maple tree in front of the Brookfield house started to bud by late March, and I spent each weekend standing in the backyard, shovel in hand, sometimes just feeling the earth beneath me like a quiet reminder. I truly belonged here. I hired a local crew to repair the roof, replace the rotted wooden window frames, and repaint the white fence that framed the small front yard. Nothing fancy. I just wanted the place to be a calm, simple space, free from lies and sidelong glances. A real home. The ground floor remained as is, with 3 rental units. I lived on the second floor, in the room my grandfather once used as his reading nook. That room had a large window facing the park, where every morning I could hear sparrows chirping and watch sunlight spill onto the white linen curtains. I bought a navy blue armchair, identical to the one Grandpa used to have. I placed it in the corner, beside a small bookshelf and a brass reading lamp. In the evenings, I sat there sipping tea, reading, journaling, and not once did anyone call my name, just to ask about Ryan. One Saturday, I asked my close friend Elise to take a picture of me. Not some formal portrait, just me, standing in front of the house, wearing an old khaki coat, holding a ring of keys, with the freshly painted mahogany door behind me. No one else in the frame, no one standing beside me. And that was exactly how I wanted it. I printed the photo, placed it in a dark wood frame, and hung it in the hallway outside my bedroom. Every time I walked by, I remembered that moment, holding those keys, and how it felt like holding my life with both hands. I no longer checked my phone constantly, no longer woke in the middle of the night because of messages from my mother. No longer waited for an explanation letter or an apology, strong enough to patch over the cracked years. I wasn't angry anymore, truly. The anger that once burned in my chest on long nights had cooled, like ashes after a fire. Now I just felt quiet. As if, after everything, peace was the one thing that most confirmed I had survived, and more than that I had lived. Right. One drizzly afternoon, I was walking around the neighborhood when I ran into Mrs. Simmons, the elderly neighbor who lived 2 doors down. She walked over slowly, carrying a bouquet of wild daisies. "You must be Catherine Moore, right?" she asked, recognition in her eyes. "Yes, I am," I replied, smiling. I used to know Edward Moore, a good man. He'd lend me his car sometimes when I needed to bring things home from the market. "This house, it's yours now?" I nodded. She handed me the flowers, a simple and kind gesture. "He'd be so proud of you. You've brought this place back to life." I held the bouquet, feeling my heart ease, as if someone had gently soothed it. Not everyone knew the full story, but that didn't matter. What mattered was, I no longer had to prove anything. Since moving to Brookfield, I started writing down the things I used to overlook. Not as a memoir or anything grand, just small entries. Today it rained lightly, I finished a good book, one of the tenants left a thank you note for fixing the washer on time. Little things, but real. The kind of feeling I never had while living in Ryan's shadow, and the weight of invisible expectation. One day, while watering plants on the back porch, I received a card. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting right away. It was my mother's. Inside was an old photo. It was me and Grandpa standing side by side at the wooden table in the backyard when I was 12. His hand rested on my shoulder. We were both smiling. Below the photo was a short message. "We didn't know how to hold on to you. I hope you hold on to yourself. Mom." No apology, no explanation, no more blame. But I didn't feel hurt anymore. I folded the card and placed it in the drawer of my writing desk, next to the letter Grandpa wrote me when I graduated high school. I didn't need promises from the past. I just needed to protect the present. That summer, I invited a few friends over for dinner. Friends who had stood by me even without knowing the whole story. We had BBQ in the backyard, strung fairy lights in the maple tree, and played soft jazz. I couldn't remember the last time I had laughed that much. One of them, Marcus, a photographer, pointed to the house and said, "This place has really good energy. Not like fancy home good, but the kind that makes you want to stay." I nodded, my eyes drifting toward the porch where the lights shimmered against fresh green leaves. Because it doesn't ask anyone to pretend. I was no longer the child sitting at the edge of the table, hoping someone would ask, "Are you okay?" I was no longer the girl staring silently at a family photo missing one face. Now I was the only one in the frame, and I was enough. No explanations needed, no forgiveness required, no need to be remembered by those who once tried to erase me from their story, because in the end, I rewrote mine. Line by line, with truth, with resilience, and with an unconditional love I gave to myself. I am Catherine Moore, and for the first time in my life, I don't need to remind anyone of that. From my own story, I've realized that sometimes the strongest thing we can do is walk away from places that no longer love us, not to get even, but to reclaim our worth. I no longer wait for validation from those who forgot me. Instead, I've learned to live truthfully, rebuild from the pieces, and turn them into something steady. In this life, even if no one gives me what I deserve, I can still give it to myself. What do you think about Catherine's story? If it were you, would you have done anything differently? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, meaningful stories about life and family in upcoming videos. My name is Rebecca, and this isn't an easy story to tell. The summer I turned 15, my parents left me at an old train station off the highway as a lesson in growing up. They didn't lose me. They didn't forget. They did it on purpose, then drove off, leaving me standing there with 2 bottles of water and a lump of doubt stuck in my throat. The silver SUV slid out of the parking lot like I had never existed. At first, I naively thought they were just circling around to park in the shade, but 5 minutes passed, then 10. I checked my phone. A message from Mom popped up on the screen. "Let's see how long it takes you to find your way home. Just a little test, Rebecca. Kids need things like this to grow up." It felt like a boulder crushed my chest. It wasn't the first time they'd done something cruel like this. 3 years ago, when I was 12, they locked the door and left me standing in the backyard during a thunderstorm because I forgot my muddy shoes by the front steps. When I was 13, Mom made me walk over 5 miles home in pouring rain, no coat, just because I missed the school bus. Back then, they called it building character. This time, I was alone at Shady Creek Station, a desolate place with a few rusted benches and a faded vending machine scorched by the sun. I gripped my phone and called Dad. No answer. I called Mom. Nothing. I tried again, still that cold, lifeless voicemail. "Can't take your call right now." My hands trembled, but inside me was a dangerous stillness, like the surface of a lake right before the storm hits. There weren't many people around. An elderly couple waiting for a late train, a man who looked like a long-haul trucker smoking in the far corner. No one noticed me. A teenage girl, face pale with shock, clutching a lukewarm bottle of water, standing still in the sweltering July heat. I checked my wallet. Just $86 left, money I saved from a few weeks working at the local bakery. Then I remembered someone, the only person who ever said I could call if I needed help, my aunt, Lauren, Mom's sister, who hadn't been in contact with the family for years because she was too soft, according to my dad. I tapped on Aunt Lauren in my contacts. My heart raced as it rang. She picked up on the second ring. "Rebecca?" Her voice sounded a little unsure, then immediately worried. "Where are you? What's going on?" I took a deep breath. I'm at Shady Creek Station. They left me here." My voice didn't sound like mine. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. She paused. I heard a car engine start on the other end. "Stay right there. I'm coming. No one gets to leave you like that." Tears spilled from my eyes uncontrollably. Not from fear, not from loneliness, but because, for the first time in my life, someone told me I didn't deserve to be treated this way. I sat on the rusted bench, back pressed against the cold concrete pillar in the shade. I didn't know it then, but my life was about to change paths. A path I would carve for myself, step by step, no longer bowing or asking permission. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back. It's been 20 years since that summer afternoon, but I still remember every detail. The sticky sweat on my old shirt, the sound of a soda can rolling underfoot, and the look in Aunt Lauren's eyes when her car pulled up at Shady Creek. She hugged me tight without asking a single question, just said, "Let's get you home." And for the first time, I understood that home doesn't have to be the place you're born. I rebuilt my life from scratch, an old suitcase, a state ID, and a heart full of cracks. Aunt Lauren let me stay in her small apartment in the suburbs of Santa Fe, where she lived alone after her divorce. I went back to school, worked as a waitress, took night classes. Those years weren't easy, but they gave me the strength to stand tall. 10 years later, I launched my own interior design firm, Blue Mesa Studio. Now, I'm the CEO of a business based in Denver, with 3 branches across the Southwest, and a team I consider family. This morning, I was preparing for a big presentation with a luxury hotel in Santa Barbara when my phone rang. A strange number appeared on the screen. I was about to decline it, but something told me I should answer. I pressed accept and brought the phone to my ear. Rebecca? That voice froze my blood. It's me, Monica. I gripped the phone tighter, my heart pounding like it would break free from my chest. Monica, my sister. Daughter of the same parents, the one who stood by them, who stayed silent when I was left at that station. How did you get my number? Aunt Lauren gave it to me. Please don't be mad at her. She just wanted to help. I didn't say anything. Monica took a deep breath, then went on, her voice trembling. Rebecca, Mom and Dad are in trouble. Dad lost his job last year. Mom is drowning in debt. The house is being foreclosed. They need help. They need you. I felt something cold shatter inside me. They need me? After all these years of silence, pretending I didn't exist? After everything? Rebecca, I'm not calling to justify, Monica said softly. I know what they did was wrong. So wrong. But they're really desperate now. Please, at least hear them out. I bit my lip, trying to keep my voice steady. What do they want? Money? Not just money, Monica replied. They need your help renegotiating with the bank, the creditors. You have a name now. You have influence. I stepped out onto the balcony, the morning breeze brushing through my hair. The misty hills of Denver stretched out below, peaceful to the point of irony. I had spent years building this life. A life free of control, free of hurt. Rebecca, please, Monica repeated, almost begging. They have no one else. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I saw myself at 15, standing alone at that station with Mom's cold message on my screen. I still kept that old phone as a reminder that I had once been seen as nothing but a burden. I opened my eyes. Fine, send me the address. But just one meeting. I'm not staying. Monica exhaled in relief. Thank you, Rebecca, I promise. And don't call me Rebecca like you didn't walk away from me, I cut in. See you Saturday, 9 a.m., the cafe by Union Station. I ended the call before she could say another word. That evening, I sat alone on the porch bench, a steaming mug of herbal tea in my hand. I scrolled through old photos, my first design drafts for Blue Mesa, snapshots with my team at our office launch. Everything I had, I built from nothing. And now they were back, not to ask how I was, but to pull me back into the mess they made. But I wasn't that 15-year-old girl anymore. This time, I would be the one setting the terms, and they would have to face the truth. Not just the truth about the debt, but the truth about who they were and who I had become. I arrived at the cafe by Union Station at 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes early. The Denver sky wore a muted gray, as if the weather, too, sensed the heaviness ahead. I chose a corner table, my back to the street, so I could observe without being easily seen. Monica arrived on time, her face still sharp and familiar, but with dark circles under her eyes that no makeup could hide. She offered a faint smile when she saw me. I just nodded. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. I crossed my arms and leaned back in my chair. Let's get to the point. I don't have much time. Monica swallowed hard. Mom's on antidepressants. Dad, well, you know he's never been good with money. They're losing everything. The house is under foreclosure, the credit card debt is massive, and they believe that if you speak on their behalf, the creditors might reconsider. I gave a dry smirk. Because I have a name. Because the one they abandoned is now worth something. Monica lowered her head, silent. I went on, my voice no longer soft. Do you have any idea how I've lived these past years? I once slept in a moldy room with a leaking ceiling, went to school while juggling 3 part-time jobs, all because the people you call mom and dad thought it was real-world education. And now they want something from me? No. They lost that right a long time ago. Monica looked like she was about to say something, but I held up my hand. If they try to contact me again, I'll have my lawyer handle it. This is the only meeting I'm agreeing to. I left money for the coffee on the table and walked out. I thought that would be the end of it. But I had underestimated how persistent they could be. 3 days later, head of Blue Mesa's communications team knocked on my office door with a tense expression. Rebecca, I think you need to see this, she said, placing an iPad on my desk. On the screen was a Facebook post, bold headline blaring, "Successful daughter abandons elderly parents without a second thought." I felt my whole body freeze. The post included an old, candid photo of me taken at a press conference, along with a long-winded story from a heartbroken mother betrayed by her own child. My name wasn't mentioned directly, but everyone knew it was me. Below the post were thousands of furious comments. I can't believe someone could be so heartless. Raised her, and this is what they get. So sad. Got rich and forgot where she came from. I sat there, silent. Ava looked at me, worried. We're trying to manage comments on the company page, but some clients have already canceled contracts. A few partners are asking for clarification. I didn't respond right away. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from anger. They didn't just want help, they wanted control. And when that didn't work, they turned into victims. That night, I received an email from an old contact in the media world. Rebecca, are you okay? The story about you is spreading fast. Maybe it's time to speak up. I stared at my computer screen for a long time. I knew I couldn't stay silent. Not this time. Not when my reputation, my company, and the truth itself were being twisted so blatantly. I opened a blank document and began to write. The words poured out like a dam breaking. Not with rage, not with bitterness, just the truth. I wrote about the past, Shady Creek Station, the storms I was locked out in, the days I survived thanks to one kind aunt. I wasn't writing to justify. I was writing to remind people that silence isn't always the right choice. When I hit post, I knew I was stepping into a new kind of fight, but this time, I wasn't afraid. Because I wasn't that abandoned girl at the old train station anymore. My post on social media was under 1,000 words. No embellishments, no whining, just the truth. Raw, cold, undeniable. I recounted the summer afternoon I was left at Shady Creek Station with a nearly dead phone and the message from Mom. Let's see how you manage. I told of being locked out during storms, the 10-mile walk in the rain because I missed the bus. I didn't use their real names, but everyone knew who I was talking about. I wasn't asking for sympathy. I just refused to stay quiet while the people who made me claw my way out of the dark pretended to be victims under the spotlight. Within 2 hours of posting, my phone started buzzing nonstop. Messages, calls, emails from old friends, colleagues, even strangers. Most were words of support, people sharing their own stories, kids once seen as burdens, who had to save themselves while others admired their families from the outside. The media picked up on it. Some journalists requested interviews, while a few major accounts reshared my post with captions like, "Not everyone gets to choose their childhood. But everyone deserves to tell the truth." Days later, public opinion had shifted. The same people who criticized me were now turning on my parents, calling them anything from neglectful to things I won't repeat. They deleted the original post, shut down their accounts, vanished from social media. But I knew it wasn't over. A week later, during a meeting with Blue Mesa's legal team, my assistant Ella walked in with a thick envelope, delivered via express mail. "From Mitchell and Crane Law Offices," she said, her voice low. I opened the letter, scanned it, and slowly folded it back up. A strange mix of amusement and bitterness settled in my chest. "They're suing me," I said simply, placing the envelope on the table. "Under Arizona's filial responsibility law, they want me to financially support them for the rest of their lives." The room was quiet. One of my attorneys, Thomas, raised an eyebrow. "That statute doesn't apply in Colorado, but if they filed in their home state, it could be a complicated case." I nodded. "We're not backing down. We face it." That afternoon, I called Aunt Lauren. She went silent when I told her. "You don't owe them anything, Rebecca," she said. "They chose to walk away. Now they have to live with that choice." I sat in my office, looking out at the Denver skyline coming to life. Every light told a story, a life, and mine had once been a faint flicker in the dark, lit by nothing but my own hands. No one had reached down to pull me up. No one but me. This lawsuit wasn't just a money grab. It was retaliation. Their way of saying I'd never escape, that the past would always find a way back. But I was ready. I was no longer the girl trembling at Shady Creek, unsure which way to go. I was the woman who'd built everything with her own hands, and I wasn't going to let them tear it down. I hired the best legal team I could find, not just to protect myself, but to put a clear, permanent end to a toxic chain that had lasted more than 2 decades. 2 days later, I received a text from an unlisted number. I didn't need to open it to know who sent it. "Rebecca, don't take this too far. They're still your parents. Remember everything we've done for you." I didn't respond. I just took a screenshot, forwarded it to my lawyer, and added a note. "Proof they're still trying emotional manipulation. Proceed." That night, I went back to my apartment and stood on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker. Inside, my laptop was still open, legal documents spread across the table. I picked up the phone and called Ava. "Tomorrow, we release a press statement. Make it clear. No sugarcoating. People deserve to know the truth. And I'm not ashamed of it." Ava paused for a second, then replied firmly, "I'll handle it. You're not alone." I smiled softly. That's right. This time I wasn't fighting alone. And I would see it through to the end. 1 week after I officially responded to the lawsuit and brought my story into the light, I thought the storm had begun to settle. I was wrong. The most dangerous people are the ones with nothing to lose, especially when they share your last name. That night, just as I finished washing dishes and was about to review plans for the new hotel project in Sedona, Ava called. Her voice was urgent, missing its usual composure. "Rebecca, you need to join the comms channel. Something big just happened." I opened my laptop and logged into the internal system. Right on the homepage were a flood of emergency emails, red subject lines, flashing warning icons. Alert, financial fraud allegations involving Blue Mesa CEO. Leak report, Rebecca Fisher suspected of embezzling investment funds. It felt like someone had kicked me hard in the stomach, not out of fear, but pure rage. I clicked on the attachment, a series of forged emails sent from strange addresses, accusing me of using company funds to buy a private home, make personal purchases, and transfer money to relatives. The accusations were carefully crafted, complete with spreadsheets, doctored bank statements, and even an anonymous confession from a so-called former insider. Not long after, messages from investors started pouring in. Some requested clear explanations. A few, while polite, showed visible concern. The rest, silence. The most dangerous kind in business. I sat frozen in front of the screen. Ava was on the other side, eyes locked on mine. "We're tracking the origin of the email accounts, but it looks like a coordinated attack." 3 hours later, our cybersecurity team uncovered the first piece of the puzzle. All the fake emails and accounts traced back to the same IP address, located in Tucson, Arizona. More specifically, A house on Crystal Creek Road. A house I knew down to every brick and white picket fence. It was my parents' old home. My hands went cold as the tech team sent over the access logs. The computer name? Celeste PC. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the audacity. I logged into my personal account and wrote a new post. I used to think the worst thing they ever did was leave me at an old train station when I was 15. But I was wrong. This past week, I've been accused of embezzlement, investor fraud, and using company funds for personal gain. All the evidence is fake. Thanks to our IT team, I now know exactly who was behind it. My own parents. This is no longer a family matter. This is a calculated campaign to destroy the reputation and career I've spent 20 years building. But I'm not afraid. I survived being disregarded and abandoned. I will survive this too. The truth may not always be easy to hear, but it is always more powerful than any lie. I hit post. Within an hour, the post had over 200,000 views. In 3 hours, it had spread across major forums, from women entrepreneur groups to respected news platforms. People weren't just condemning my parents' actions, they were starting to question the toxicity of certain family dynamics. At the same time, I received an internal call from Blue Mesa's legal representation. Rebecca, we have enough grounds to file a countersuit for defamation and business interference. Do you want to move forward? I looked out the window, the city lights twinkling beyond the glass. I thought of the sleepless nights, of my first office paid with savings, of the first client who believed in my vision when all I had was a sketch and a promise. I turned back, my voice firm. Yes, let's begin. The next morning, I got one final message from an unknown number. If you do this, what will be left of us? I typed back, steady and clear. Nothing. And that's the choice you made. I hit send. And this time, I knew. I had cut the final tie binding me to the past. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had become someone they never expected. And I wouldn't let anyone, not even the ones who gave me life, destroy that. 2 months after the countersuit and the release of undeniable evidence, everything went quiet. No more anonymous emails, no more slanderous posts spreading online, no one messaging me to remember the blood bond. Finally, silence returned. Not the silence of fear, but the peace after a storm. One Wednesday morning, as I was reviewing a restaurant layout for a hotel in San Diego, Ella stepped into my office, holding a file. Rebecca, you should see this. I opened it. Bank documents, asset liquidation notices, photos of my parents' old home on a real estate listing. The sign in front of the gate read, "Urgent sale, bankruptcy liquidation." The house where they had once thrown parties, refused to let me step foot in after I left. It now stood empty in a quiet neighborhood. Dry grass in the yard and shuttered windows staring blankly. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel satisfaction. What I felt was a slow, deep relief. Like finally taking off a pair of shoes that had been hurting you for years, but you'd kept wearing anyway. They had lost everything, not because of me, but because of the choices they once believed were right. The silence back then, the coldness, and the resentment they turned toward the growth of the child they chose to discard. That afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I wasn't planning to answer, but my hand lifted on its own. A hoarse, tired voice spoke on the other end. Rebecca? It's me, Monica. I closed my eyes for a moment, then opened them. What do you want? Can you just listen for a minute? I didn't respond. Monica continued, her voice breaking with each word. I know it's too late. You were right. They ruined everything themselves. Mom's crashing with an old friend now, and Dad, he doesn't talk to anyone anymore. Whenever someone brings up your name, they just look down. No one believes them anymore. I stayed silent. I'm not calling to ask for anything, Monica added. I want to say, I'm sorry for standing by when you needed me, For staying quiet when I should have spoken up. My voice was calm. An apology doesn't change the past. I know, Monica whispered. You have every right not to forgive. I just didn't want you to think, no one regrets what happened. I exhaled. No anger, no emotion. You didn't lose me, Monica, I said evenly. Mom and Dad did. And they don't get another chance. I hung up before she could say more. That evening, I texted Aunt Lauren. Are you free this weekend? I'd love to take you to dinner. You pick the place. She replied almost instantly. Of course. There's a new Italian spot in Boulder. I hear the fresh pasta is amazing. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in days. Aunt Lauren. The one who opened her arms when the world turned its back. No demands, no strings, just presence, warmth. The very thing I had yearned for my entire childhood. Before bed, I scrolled through my contacts, down to the 2 names that still sat there like unhealed scars, Celeste Holloway and Donald Holloway. I didn't hesitate anymore. I blocked both. Then I closed the app. No anger, no regret. It was just time. I used to think I needed a confrontation, an apology, or acknowledgement. But the truth is, I didn't need any of that. I just needed freedom. Freedom from expectations, from the weight of trying to prove my worth to people who never saw it. I stepped out onto the balcony, a mug of hot tea in hand, the night breeze drifting through my hair. The Denver skyline sparkled below, as calm as my heart in that moment. I had once been the girl left on the side of the road, with a few dollars and a shredded sense of dignity. Now, I was the woman who rewrote her own story. Not for revenge, but because I deserved a different ending. One of freedom. Family isn't always the people who share your blood. It's the ones who stay when everyone else walks away. The ones who listen, believe, and never make you prove you're worthy of love. Instead, I don't carry resentment anymore, but I don't forget either. And that's how I choose to let go. From my own story, I've learned something important. Blood doesn't always mean love. No one has the right to make you feel less just because of the family you were born into. Choosing to walk away from toxic relationships isn't selfish, it's brave. I don't need revenge or late apologies. I just need peace. And if you're struggling with pain caused by the people closest to you, remember this. You have every right to choose where you belong. What do you think about Rebecca's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more real, heartfelt stories about life, family, and the power of choice. I stood in the kitchen, my apron stained with grease, the smell of grilled meat and burnt bread clinging to my skin like a thin veil of smoke. Outside, cheerful music blasted from the Bluetooth speaker, mixing with the lively chatter of my parents and nearly 30 guests raising glasses to celebrate their 35th wedding anniversary. A big party, strung with twinkle lights and fresh flowers, hosted right in the backyard of our wooden house in the suburbs of Charleston, South Carolina. I, Christina, 33, am the eldest daughter, also the one who started setting up the tent before sunrise, carried every table and chair into the yard, hung every string light on the oak tree, and grilled countless batches of burgers for the big happy family, soaking in the festive mood. Lisa, my younger sister, was lounging on a wicker chair by the pool, sipping a cocktail her husband had mixed. Our youngest, Jack, was laughing with the kids, and no one cared that I was still working the grill. Sweat soaked the back of my shirt, but no one asked a single question. By the time the sunset bathed the garden in golden light, my father, Robert, stood up and gently tapped his silver spoon against a glass. Everyone immediately fell silent, turning their attention to him. My mother, Margaret, stood beside him, her arm looped through his, beaming. "We have something special to share," my father said in a deep voice, full of pride. "Next week, the whole family is going on vacation to the Florida Keys. A 7-day trip, all booked. There'll be blue water, white sand, and an outdoor party right on a yacht." Cheers erupted like fireworks. Lisa hugged her husband and jumped with excitement. Jack shouted, "Yes!" I told you there'd be a surprise. My mom nodded nonstop, her face glowing. For a moment, I felt a wave of relief. A vacation. Maybe this was finally my chance to rest after so many years of being the one behind the scenes. I washed my hands, walked toward the table, and gave a polite smile. When are we leaving? I'll need to adjust my work schedule a bit. The air suddenly felt unnaturally still. Eyes glanced at me, then quickly turned away as if my question had never been asked. My father frowned, his gaze turning cold. You don't need to know, he said slowly, clearly enough for everyone to hear. You're not part of us. I thought I misheard. My eyes widened and I froze. My mother scoffed and shrugged, like his words weren't worth caring about. She turned to chat with a distant aunt, leaving me standing in the middle of the yard with empty hands. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to drown out every sound in my head. Then the murmurs picked back up, washing over me like a wave of indifference. I had cleaned the house, made the shopping list, cooked Mom's favorite stew, and ran around to make sure this party went perfectly. And yet, the daughter who gave up a study abroad opportunity to stay home and care for the family when Dad had a stroke, was being treated like an outsider. I don't remember how I slipped away from the crowd. I only realized I was on the porch when I felt my hand gripping my purse tightly. The heavy summer air didn't bother me nearly as much as the weight in my chest. It felt like someone had slammed shut a door I'd been holding open for decades. Christina, are you okay? Lisa's voice came from behind, hesitant. I didn't turn around. I opened the wooden gate and walked out, leaving the twinkling lights behind me. Each step down the gravel path toward the garage felt like it was tearing apart the last piece of me that still held on to their kindness. I got into my car, shut the door, and cranked up the AC, trying to blow away everything that had just happened. I didn't cry. I just felt empty, like everything inside me had been drained. I turned on the radio. An old country song came on, singing about leaving a place once called home. I nodded quietly. Maybe it was time for me to leave too. Not to run away, but to start living. I returned to my small apartment on the third floor of an old building in the south of Savannah, where every step in the hallway echoed with creaky wood and the scent of nearby meals lingered in the air. The place was only about 430 square feet, but I kept it spotless, my own little corner of the world, untouched by anyone else. I took off my heels, sank into the armchair by the window, and stared into the dark sky. Outside was an empty parking lot, yellow lights reflecting off the hoods of worn-out cars. The party was over. My father's words still echoed in my head like a cut that wouldn't heal. You're not part of us. I had sacrificed my youth to carry their burdens. At 19, I turned down a full-ride scholarship to stay home and care for Mom after her minor stroke. At 24, I took out a loan to buy Dad's truck when his business went under. At 30, I planned Lisa's wedding, while all she had to do was pick out a dress. I was their shadow, silent, unseen, and no one ever thought to say thank you. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the living room floor, pulling out boxes from under the bed, old keepsakes, family photos from when I was a little girl clutching a teddy bear behind Mom's legs, a birthday card I made in 5th grade that no one ever responded to. I had kept everything like proof that I existed in that house. But now, they all felt meaningless. At 3 a.m., I stood up, walked into the bedroom, and pulled an old suitcase from the top of the closet. I didn't need much: a few outfits, my travel camera, a journal, and some essentials. I opened the small drawer by the bed and took out the envelope with the savings I had quietly set aside each month, even though my office job didn't pay much. Nearly $1,200. Not enough for a luxurious new life, but enough to leave this place and breathe on my own terms. I opened Google Maps on my phone, looking at the map of the U.S. with countless little glowing dots, like invitations. I wanted the ocean. I needed the air of freedom, of wide-open spaces where no one gave orders or reminded me to become a version of myself they expected. I remembered a coastal city on the west side of Florida, Clearwater. I had once come across the name in a travel article, a place with soft white sands stretching far and palm trees swaying in the ocean breeze. I had never been there, which only made it more appealing. I booked the earliest bus, 6 a.m. from the Savannah Greyhound station, one way. I turned off the lights, locked the door, and slung my backpack over my shoulder while the sky was still wrapped in a thin layer of fog. The station was quiet, with only a few people scattered around, a woman holding a cat in a fabric bag, a young man wearing headphones staring at his phone. I bought a bland cup of coffee from a vending machine and sat down to wait. The bus arrived, the doors opened, and the driver greeted me with sleepy but friendly eyes. I stepped on, handed over my ticket, and chose a seat by the window. As the wheels began to turn, I looked through the glass and saw my reflection mixed with the dimming streetlights. Savannah faded into the distance, taking with it the years I had once called home. I didn't know what waited for me in Clearwater. A new job, a temporary place to stay, or just days wandering by the sea. But one thing I knew for sure. The place I had just left was no longer home. And this time, I wasn't running. I was choosing. I quietly opened my notebook, turned to a blank page, and wrote the first line in firm handwriting. Day 1, I begin again, from myself. I arrived in Clearwater close to noon, the sun high above and the heat rising from the pavement like a foggy mirror. The bus station was small. Just an information desk, a few benches, and a vending machine. I stood still for a moment, gripping the strap of my backpack, looking around the unfamiliar city with my heart pounding. No one knew who I was, and that felt more comforting than I expected. I rented a small room above an old bar called Theo's, less than a 10-minute walk from the beach. The innkeeper, Mr. Theo, a man in his 60s with salt-colored beard and eyes sharp enough to read your thoughts, just waved off my question about ID. Pay a week up front? Around here, everyone's needed a fresh start. My room was a small attic space, just enough for a single bed, a worn wooden desk, and a window facing the parking lot. Downstairs, the bar buzzed every night, but I didn't mind. The music and laughter felt like a different rhythm of life, a sound that reminded me the world was still spinning, and I was now part of a different corner of it. The next morning, I walked barefoot along the beach, my feet sinking lightly into the sand. The salty breeze tangled my hair, but I didn't bother to fix it. I stepped into a small cafe called Misty Beans, sitting on a corner near the harbor with a hand-painted sign and chipped wooden chairs. The girl behind the counter had a chestnut pixie cut and smoky gray eyes. She glanced at me from head to toe, then said without greeting, "We're seriously short on staff. You know how to pull an espresso?" I froze for a second. I can learn fast. She raised an eyebrow, then tossed me an apron. I'm Brooke, starting today. Don't spill milk on the steamer. It just got cleaned. I didn't know what made Brooke hire me after just one sentence, but from that moment, I was part of Misty Beans. A little coffee shop full of odd but genuine people. Regulars included fishermen, dock workers, a few musicians who dropped by to play harmonica in the corner, and an older woman who ordered a decaf every morning but never finished it. Brooke was sharp, a bit blunt but not unkind. She worked like a whirlwind, fast, precise, and never polite. But at the end of each shift, she'd quietly leave a whole muffin set aside for me, without saying a word. Maybe that was her way of caring. One afternoon after work, I wandered into a thrift store tucked deep in an alley behind a church. In the darkest corner of the shop, I spotted an old, dusty camera, square-shaped with peeling faux leather at the edges. I picked it up and turned it over in my hands. Canon AE1, a film camera I had once dreamed of back in high school. Want it? The shop owner asked, voice low and raspy. Still works, just needs film. I hesitated, then nodded. Buying it wasn't exactly a wise financial move, but I felt like I had just picked up a piece of memory long forgotten. I used to own a similar camera, but I sold it to help Dad pay the electric bill when I was 20. This time, I bought it for myself. That night, I sat on the back steps behind the bar, the first roll of film already loaded. I snapped a few shots, dim streetlights, tree shadows stretching across the pavement, a couple walking by, hand in hand. The photos wouldn't be perfect, the lighting wasn't right, but pressing that shutter made my heart stir to a rhythm. I thought I had forgotten. Brooke passed by, eyeing me curiously. Thought you only knew how to make coffee. I smiled softly, lifted the camera, and snapped a picture of her in the yellow glow. Turns out, I still remember I once had a dream. She didn't say anything, but gave a slight nod, as if she understood more than I had shared. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something inside me slowly coming back to life. Not for anyone else, but because I had finally started listening to myself. One evening after my shift, I was sitting in my cramped attic room, soft yellow light spilling onto a freshly developed photo hanging on the wall. A shot of the dock at sunset, orange blending into purple between the cables stretching across the sky. I had just finished cleaning up and opened a new box of film when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with the words, "Emily, little sister." My heart sank. I let it ring a few times before answering, holding it to my ear without saying anything first. Emily's voice came through, full of concern. "Where are you? Everyone's freaking out because you just left like that. Mom said you didn't say a word, just disappeared, like you never existed." I leaned my head against the wall and took a deep breath. Emily was only 19, the only one in the family who had ever asked if I was tired, who once sat with me the whole afternoon when I got sick from overworking while still having to take care of the kids. "I'm okay, and I need this. Not to run away, but to find myself again." I spoke softly, without a hint of anger. "But they're saying all kinds of stuff about you. Mom called you ungrateful. Dad got so mad he smashed the TV remote." Emily paused, then sighed. "You know what? They still planned to go to Florida, but now they're making me stay home to watch the kids. I told them I couldn't, and they said, 'Then call Christina. Tell her to come back and make it right.'" I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the story had gotten so old it was almost boring. Make it right? I lived like a shadow in that house for over a decade. What exactly am I making right? I know better than anyone." Emily's voice softened. "But they never see it. They just see you as the one who can handle everything." "And they were wrong," I said firmly. "This time, I'm not coming back to patch up the cracks they made. You need to understand that." Emily was quiet, then whispered, "I miss you." "I miss you too," I replied. "But if I go back, I'll be pulled right back into that role, and I can't live that life again." We sat in silence for a moment. Then she ended the call with a quiet sigh. I stared at the phone for a long time, feeling heavy, but I knew I couldn't falter now. Just 2 days later, while I was wiping tables at Misty Beans, my phone rang again. This time it was Mom. I wasn't going to answer, but then, out of some old reflex I hadn't quite let go of, I swiped the screen. "Christina?" Her voice came through immediately, no greeting. "Do you still care about this family at all? Walking out in the middle of everything? Do you think that was the right thing to do?" I put the rag down and stepped into the back of the shop to get away from the noise. I already said, I need space. I'm not the one who cleans up behind everyone anymore. "Don't raise your voice," Mom snapped. "You've thrown the whole family into chaos. Lisa can't handle all 3 kids. Jack has to work overtime. Who's supposed to watch them? Weren't you always the best at that?" I let out a dry laugh, my voice still calm. Yes, I was good at it. So good that everyone thought it was my duty. But it wasn't. It was a sacrifice. And now I'm choosing not to sacrifice anymore. She paused for a second, then said, cold as ice, "If you walk away this time, don't expect to come back. We don't need selfish people." I swallowed hard, then spoke, my voice steady. "Good. Because I don't need a family that only sees me when they need something. I used to be the pillar that held everyone up, and all I got in return was being forgotten. Christina, I cut her off. I spent my whole youth making sure everyone else was okay. I skipped college. I worked 2 jobs. I gave pieces of my life to everyone else. Now, I just want to keep one piece for myself. If that makes me selfish in your eyes, then so be it. I hung up before she could say anything more. My heart was pounding. My hand gripped the phone so tightly my fingertips turned white. Brooke passed by, raising an eyebrow. You look like you just ran a marathon in the sun. Call home? I nodded and sighed. Not easy, but necessary. She smirked and handed me a cold lemonade. Cut the anchor if you want the boat to float. I gave a faint smile. There was a quiet truth in her joke. I had started to leave the old waters behind, even if the new waves were shaky. At least this time, I was the one steering. That night, after a nearly 10-hour shift, I was just about to head upstairs when Brooke stopped me at the back door of Misty Beans. She had on a denim jacket, a canvas backpack slung over her shoulder, and that familiar half-smile, half-sarcastic look on her face. Christina, she said, there's a photography class tonight at the community center near the beach. A friend of mine, Julian, is teaching. You should check it out. Bring that dusty old camera of yours. I blinked in surprise. I thought you didn't believe I could take a decent photo, she winked. I still don't. But Julian has an eye. Who knows? Maybe your photos aren't that bad. Instead of going back to my room like usual, I followed her to the community center, a 1-story cream-colored building tucked behind a row of palm trees. The classroom was lit with warm yellow lights, the chairs arranged in a circle, and photographs hung all over the walls. From crashing waves to toothless elderly smiles. Julian was a man in his 40s, with long hair tied back and ink stains always on his hands. He looked at me, then at the camera in my hand, and smiled. Canon AE1, a classic choice, he said. You shot before? I did, but it's been a long time, I replied, my voice low. Then it's perfect timing. Julian nodded. This class isn't about turning anyone into a pro. We just want to help people see the things they've forgotten to notice. That evening's class had no dry theory, no overwhelming techniques, just conversations about light, emotion, and the stories hidden in every image. Julian gave me my first assignment. Photograph something you can't forget. I went out to the beach early the next morning, camera in hand, heart feeling empty. I didn't know what to shoot. But then, in that moment when the light filtered through the beams of the old pier, I raised the camera. Click! That became the first shot in a series of photos capturing pieces of what shaped me. A rusted bike abandoned by a fence. A young mother pushing a stroller while holding a second child in her arms. Sandals neatly lined up outside someone's front door. Each image felt like a whisper from memory. Distant, yet achingly familiar. Julian started paying more attention to me. He would linger longer in front of the photos I brought in. One day, he said, Christina, your photos have something real. Not perfect, but honest. You should think about putting them into a set. I was a bit unsure. You mean, like an exhibit? He nodded. There's a local photo showcase next month. The theme is me and the pieces I carry. I think your work fits. I spent a whole week thinking it over. But one night, flipping through my developed negatives, I realized the set had its own rhythm. A story without words. I titled it, Roots and Wings, because I had once clung so tightly to where I came from, but now I was learning how to fly away. The day of the exhibit took place in a renovated warehouse turned art space. My photos were displayed on a panel of raw wood. The lights above cast shadows onto each frame. I wore a simple pale blue dress, my hair loosely pinned up, standing among strangers, each sipping wine slowly. Julian came over, placed a hand on my shoulder, and whispered, You've stepped out of your shadow. An older woman stopped in front of the photo I took of the rusty bike. She turned to me and asked, Did you take this? I nodded. She smiled, her eyes slightly glassy. It reminded me of my childhood. I had a bike just like that. Thank you. Just those 3 words, thank you, made something inside me tremble. For the first time, something I created, not for anyone else, not out of duty, but for myself, had touched someone else. That night, I left the exhibit after the streetlights had come on. Brooke waved at me from a distance, raising a soda can in celebration. Julian shook my hand and told me a small gallery was considering inviting me to join a street photography series. I walked along the beach, the waves gently brushing the shore. Inside, there were no more questions like, do I deserve this, or what would they think if they saw me here? In their place was something simple but whole. I was heading in the right direction. And for the first time in many years, I knew with certainty the place where I belonged wasn't where people needed me to do everything. It was where I got to be myself. One afternoon in early April, I was behind the counter at Misty Beans, quickly whipping up a round of lattes for a group of tourists from New Jersey, when the bell above the door jingled. I looked up, out of habit, and as soon as my eyes hit the doorway, I froze. He stood there. Robert Mitchell, a tall man with neatly combed salt and pepper hair, wearing the same old plaid shirt I had ironed for him hundreds of times. My father. He didn't look around the shop, didn't greet anyone, just stared straight at me, as if nothing else existed in the room filled with the smell of coffee and quiet chatter but him and me. I set the latte down on the tray, wiped my hands on a cloth, and stepped out from behind the counter. My heart pounded, like part of me hadn't quite prepared for this moment. But my feet didn't tremble, not like they used to. You came a long way, I said calmly. Clearwater's over 400 miles from Savannah. My father cleared his throat, his gaze stiff. We need to talk. I signaled to Brooke. She nodded and took over the counter without a word. I led my father to the back of the shop, where a wooden bench sat under a low-hanging palm tree, sunlight flickering through the leaves and scattering patterns across the ground. Dad sat down first, slowly, as if carrying the weight of something heavy. I sat across from him, arms folded. Your mother's very disappointed, he began, his voice not loud but heavy enough to weigh down the air. The Florida trip was canceled. Lisa couldn't handle the 3 kids. Jack got into a fight with his wife and left for 3 days. Everything's a mess. I looked at him, neither nodding nor shaking my head. Just silent. We didn't expect you to just walk away like that, he continued, without saying a word. It's like the family means nothing to you anymore. I gave a thin smile without a trace of sarcasm. And what about that day? When you told me I wasn't part of the family? Was I supposed to stay, keep wiping tables, holding babies, and faking smiles while you all ignored me during the vacation? His face twitched slightly, but he didn't argue. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in him. The man who always believed he had the right to raise his voice, make decisions, and pile every burden onto me without a single thank you. You don't know how much you've sacrificed, he said, a little softer. I nodded. You're right. You don't know. Because when I withdrew my application to study photography in Boston to stay home and care for Mom, you said it was the natural thing to do. When I gave Lisa all my savings for her wedding, Mom said it was what the eldest sister should do. But now, no one's left to carry the load. And no one knows what to do. I leaned back against the bench, looking him straight in the eye. I'm not angry. Not anymore. But I'm also not obligated to come back and patch up a life everyone assumed I'd always be there to save. He stayed quiet for a long time. For a moment, I thought he might blow up, stand up and walk away. But instead, he just exhaled slowly. I didn't realize how much this hurt you. I was surprised by that sentence, not because he apologized, he still hadn't, but because for the first time he admitted he hadn't known. It was the first crack in the wall I thought would never change. What are you doing here? He asked, his voice lower now. Rebuilding my life, working at a cafe, learning photography again. I had my first exhibition last week. Someone bought one of my photos. He tilted his head slightly, a shift in his eyes. I didn't know you were still taking pictures. I smiled faintly. You never asked. We sat a few more minutes in silence. The wind rustled through the palm leaves, carrying the salty air and the faint sound of music from the cafe. Finally, he stood up. He didn't reach out, didn't say anything sentimental. The door at home's still open if you want to come back. I stood too, not nodding, not promising. I just said, I am home, Dad, right here. He gave a small nod, one I couldn't tell was out of acceptance or reluctance. But whatever it was, as his figure disappeared behind the row of buildings, I felt a part of the weight in my chest lift. I hadn't gotten angry, hadn't run, hadn't caved in. I had said everything I needed to say. And most importantly, I no longer felt like I owed them anything. I went back inside the cafe, where the smell of coffee was still warm and customers' laughter still filled the air. Brooke raised an eyebrow when she saw me come in. You okay? I nodded, my smile small but certain. Better than ever. 2 weeks after seeing Dad, I received an email from a local art gallery called Baylight Collective. They had attended the photo showcase at the community center and were especially drawn to the Roots and Wings collection. In the email, they invited me to display several of my photos in the upcoming summer exhibition, a yearly event that draws both locals and visitors from all over to Clearwater. I read the email 3 times, my heart pounding. For the first time in my life, a door I thought I'd missed forever had opened in the most unexpected way. No more, Christina, can you help out? Or, hey, can you watch the kids for a bit? But Christina, the photographer. I brought the news to the cafe, planning to tell Brooke after my shift. But the moment I stepped into the prep kitchen, she turned around with a look that said she already knew everything. You got the invite from Baylight, didn't you? She asked, one hand pouring milk, the other pressing the espresso grinder. I blinked. How'd you know? Julian's terrible at keeping secrets, she smirked. Anyway, I told you, you have the eye of someone who's lived in silence. I didn't answer right away. But later, back in that dim attic room, I sat down and opened the leather notebook I used to jot down a line or two each day. On a fresh page, I wrote, I've stepped out of the shadows and the light doesn't scare me anymore. 3 days later, I got a text from Emily. Just one line. They're planning a trip to Hawaii. This time, Mom hired a babysitter. I looked at the message, feeling something old and dusty dissolve inside me. Not bitterness, not regret. Just a clear awareness. They figured it out without me. They didn't need me. And that wasn't as sad as I once thought. I replied simply, have a great trip. Take care of yourself. Emily sent back a smiley face, then silence. But that was enough. I knew she understood, and I no longer needed to prove anything. The Baylight Collective exhibit took place on a breezy May afternoon, with cool sea air drifting through the tourist-filled streets. The gallery space was inside a renovated warehouse. White walls, bare wooden floors, and warm yellow lighting like late sunlight. My photos were displayed in the last section, 5 in total, arranged along the length of a journey. The first was a shot of an empty pier at sunset, symbolizing separation. The final one was a photo I took of Brooke standing beneath the palm tree behind the cafe, holding a cup of coffee and smiling. Soft light falling on her hair like an unnamed piece. I stood quietly watching people pass by, their eyes lingering on the photos. No one knew who I was, and I liked that. I was no longer Big Sister Christina, the one who handles everything. I was a storyteller. Through light and time. A middle-aged woman stopped in front of the palm tree and stood there for a while. She turned to me and asked softly, "Did you take this?" I nodded. She gently touched her chest and smiled. I don't know why, but this photo makes me want to go home. I thanked her, though my throat tightened. It was the first time someone truly felt what I tried to capture. That sense of being lost, then finding yourself again through something simple. An hour later, a gallery representative came to find me, announcing that the old pier, the first photo in the Roots and Wings series, had been purchased by a collector from New Orleans. $200. Not a large sum, but to me, it was a quiet confirmation that I had done the right thing. That night, I left the gallery with an envelope of cash in my hand and unformed dreams in my head. I stopped by Misty Beans. Brooke was cleaning up the last of the cups. "Can I buy you a cappuccino?" I asked, half joking. She glanced at me. "I thought you were a big-shot artist now, coming back to play barista?" I laughed. "No. I came back because this place is part of the journey. And I still love coffee." We sat by the window, street lights sparkling outside. I told her about the woman at the gallery, the photo buyer, and how I no longer felt the pull to return to the things that once held me down. "You've found your freedom," Brooke said, her voice soft like waves. I didn't answer. I just looked out at the street, where an old bicycle rolled past under the lights, leaving a trail of shimmer like a never-ending current. I knew, from that moment on, I wasn't going back. Because this life, simple as it may be, windswept as it still is mine. Leaving my family wasn't something I ever imagined I'd do, but the moment they pushed me out of their world, another door opened, the one that led to freedom. I am no longer the one who carries the weight, no longer the shadow behind their expectations. Now, I live my own life with my old camera, mornings by the sea, and a quiet peace in my heart. I don't regret it, because for the first time, I'm not living to please anyone else. I'm living to be myself. What do you think about Christina's journey? Have you ever felt the same way she did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, honest stories about family and life.